And it reminded me of that there really is, or are, I should say, three things that the Course says over and over again. It basically says this is what we need for our healing, for our awakening. It says we need to know who we are, we need to know who our source is, and then we need to have the steps for awakening. And it says this over and over again. It's constantly, in those first lessons, it's telling you who you are. It's telling you who God is. And it's flipping back and forth all the time in that, because we don't know. I know you go, oh, of course I know who I am. I've been with me for 50-some, 40-some, 60-some, 70-some. You know the number of years. I know who I am. And yet we also would say, I've been with myself for these 50, 40, whatever years, and I have no idea who I am, because I am constantly changing. So the Course says that's not who you are. That personification is not who you are. We need to know who you are, and that's what this lesson talks about. God is my life. I have no life but His. Do we really get that? Do we understand that? You know, God is our source, nothing outside of ourselves but God. And we've placed so much of our 40, 50, 60, 70 years, if we will, on what's outside of us and how we react according to the outside. So the Course is really about a redirection for us into who we really are, who God is, and how do we awake. And the Course is always telling us that we awake as we accept responsibility, as we extend forgiveness, as we remember who walks with us, and as we let healing be. Those are the steps. Those really are the steps that are said over and over and over again. So practicing that, if you know those are true, practicing that then becomes our determination. Just like this chapter will tell us in the next section, it'll say to us, this year we're going to be determined not to deny what has been given us by God. We're going to be determined to not deny who we are, who God is, and the steps of awakening, and how important those are to us, how important forgiveness is to us, how important it is for us to take responsibility in our lives. Not guilt, but responsibility for where we find ourselves, for the things that have gone on in our lives, for the circumstances and situations where we find ourselves. It's important. You know why it's important? Not to make you wrong, not to make somebody else bad. It's important so that transformation can take place. Because if you take responsibility, then you can change it. If somebody else is in control, oops, we got to go find them. Line them up so that they can help us make the change. No, you have the power. I've got the power. You know how that song goes? Who sang that song? I don't know, but it's always out there. But we have the power. No one else has the power to do that for us. So if we can recognize that, if we take that responsibility, great. That's why forgiveness is something you do, not somebody else does for you. I've heard people say, oh, forgiveness. And they go, well, there's a problem going on, and that person is so totally responsible for all the pain and suffering that's going on. And they say, well, what do I have to forgive? They said, because you want to be released. But they're responsible. Why should I have to do it? Because you want to be released. Because you want to be released. That's why you do it. You forgive so you are blessed. Not so you sit there in pain and suffering anymore. And that's what the Course is about. It's about helping us to awaken. So we have to accept our responsibility. We have to. If we want to awaken, we're going to have to forgive. Let love, if you will, lead the way. And then to me, the thing the Course tells us over and over again is to know that we do not walk alone. We have to remember, again, who God is. We have to remember that that source is there constantly. There has never been a time that we have walked alone on the path that we have chosen. And that's why fear, as the Course tells us, should be impossible. If you knew who was always there, fear would be impossible. There was a movie that was out that had, it was Something Close and Incredibly Loud you remember that movie? It was about, I can't remember if it was Tom Hanks. Was it Tom Hanks who played, and Sandra Bullock, and this little boy who had was an autistic, their son was autistic, and the father was so good at helping the boy to learn how to deal with and learn how to be independent even with his autism. And he dies in the World Trade Center. It was a movie, something and incredibly close. Something loud, extremely loud and incredibly close, right? Is that it? Good movie. And I'm going to blow it for you. So if you've never seen it and you don't want to know the ending, put your fingers in your ears. But it's been out for an awfully long time. It's my function to ruin every movie for people. Spoiler alert. But at the end of it, this little boy grows and just develops in himself. And it looks as if the mother, Sandra Bullock, just like checks out because the husband dies, and it's like she's nowhere to be found, and the boy is constantly on this adventure. He thinks that his dead father, through just has left him things that will tell him the purpose of his life. And he does. He really grows. He gets a connection with his grandfather and all these great things at the end of the movie. And at the end, he's kind of sitting on the bed with his mother, and he says, "You were never there." And she finally says, I watched everything you did. But I did it from a distance because I knew your father would want you to be able to do this on your own. And we see in vignettes the story again play out with the mother always looking, always watching him behind the car, behind the door, behind the this, behind the that, and then following up and telling people the boy is coming, and then visiting the people after the boy goes there. So he was never alone, even though he was so clearly sure he was alone and that she had kind of abandoned him. And yet she knew that he had to continue the process that the dad had set forth of being able to do this on his own. And I love that movie at the end. I'm just bawling at the end of the movie because on so many levels, not only was it just a very sweet and touching movie, but then it reminded me again of this internal truth, and internal and eternal, if you will, truth, that God is always watching us. That there's never a time when we are alone. That we are gently helped and carried on the path that we have chosen. That He is always walking with us every step of the way.